be mortal people in a great city, but much of the behavior of these people, the technology they use, and the layout of the city is quite foreign. Dear me, what is this land? What is that hideous obelisk? Have we died and entered the kingdom of heaven? Oh no. Look, Mr. Adams there! Who could that be but Satan? The American people are amused as they see what appears to be a group of street performers pretending to be historical figures, stunned by the world around them, but quickly become concerned as they display erratic and dangerous behavior. Adams runs into traffic. A woman offers Franklin a strange, small, glowing box to, as she says, call someone, and Franklin smashes it, believing it to be a tool of witchcraft. Jefferson punches Hamilton. Long story short, a group of men behaving wildly and claiming to have no idea where they are quickly taken into custody. Give me liberty or give me death. Tell it to the judge, buddy. But could he? Could these individuals tell it to the judge or explain their situation to anyone? Did they speak the English that we speak, or has it changed much in the past few centuries to the point where it would be quite different, maybe not easy to understand? Well, yes, these individuals spoke essentially the same English that we speak, with only some minor differences in spelling and pronunciation. English becomes more difficult to understand the farther back in time you go, to the extent that Old English is essentially a totally different language. But by the mid and late 1700s, things like the Great Vowel Shift had ended, and the language was on its path to becoming a standardized language. Modern Americans can still read things like the Declaration of Independence with no trouble because the language has barely changed. And thus, because they could communicate with us easily enough, they would eventually be able to convince someone that something was really, truly off, and not in the crazy way, but in the time-travel-y way. Scientists and historians then take an interest in the event and are eventually able to deduce that these individuals had, somehow, in fact, traveled into the future. We today are actually capable of very, very primitive time travel, believe it or not. Certain astronauts, for example, have traveled a notable fraction of a second into the future while in space. This relates to what's called time dilation. It's a subject we'll talk about someday more over on our science channel, Lucinox, but regardless, we haven't figured out how to go back in time, and so these gentlemen would be stuck here. Now, there is another issue which must be addressed with these time travel scenarios: disease. Would they be at risk of death from infection from diseases in our world that they had not encountered, and would we be at risk from diseases that they might be carrying and have since gone extinct? Well, yes. Exposure to new diseases, and moreover new strains of diseases which plagued them in the past, could be a serious threat to them, even in our world where diseases are kept at bay by sanitation and individuals suffering from them are more often saved by medical technology. Likewise, any diseases they could be carrying may cause havoc in our world as well. This would have to be corrected. However, for the sake of this video not sucking and ending abruptly with them dying, we will assume that the time-traveling process also sterilized any harmful bacteria and viruses that they might be carrying and brought their immune systems up to date against diseases from our world. And thus the long process of teaching them about our modern world and how to navigate it would begin. Though these men were intelligent and well-educated, with Jefferson and Franklin especially being prodigious scholars and inventors on the frontiers of science and technology in their day, teaching them to navigate our modern world would still quite likely take months, if not, for certain things, years. One thing which would stand out immediately is the speed of our travel. Let's start there. Franklin, Adams, and Jefferson were each ambassadors to France, the former two during the Revolution, Jefferson after. These journeys were often long and difficult. To sail from the United States to Europe in their age took, depending on a variety of factors such as the type of ship they sailed and the route they took, generally over a month, likely about 2. Adam's journey to France, for example, took him 6 weeks and 4 days, and that was considered fast for the winter. Today, a common person could book a flight from Philadelphia to Paris and arrive in under 10 hours. That is, roughly 72 times faster. Likewise, traveling from what is today Maine to Georgia, the length of the 13 colonies on horseback, would perhaps have taken about a month, though you likely would have wanted to sail. Today, traveling from Augusta, Maine to Savannah, Georgia would take about 18 hours by car. But of course today the US is much larger than the country with which they were familiar. Traveling from Bangor, Maine to San Jose, California would take about 50 hours, and Orlando to Anchorage, 77 hours. Indeed, the world as a whole is a much larger place than they were aware. How much of it did they know about? Well, they were a part of an age in which civilization was, for the first time, coming to understand the true size and makeup of the whole world. They were not quite there yet, but they were much closer than any other people in history. The land west of the Mississippi River, which would eventually become part of the United States, namely the interior included in the 1803 Louisiana Purchase, was not well charted. Exploring it officially was the task of Lewis and Clark, whom Jefferson funded. In fact, the area was so poorly explored that when these adventurers discovered a fossil of the extinct mastodon, Jefferson wondered if those creatures might still be found in the American West. Abroad, the outlines of the Americas, Asia, Africa, and Australia were becoming known, though places like Africa and Australia's interior remained a bit of a mystery. Russia would not discover Antarctica until 1820, by the way. To see that this land, from sea to sea, had been developed to the extent that it has, would likely not shock them, given our impressive technological capabilities, but it would still be quite a marvel to them, and it is noteworthy that the country they founded now governs many territories of which they were largely ignorant. It would amaze them to see how the country rapidly grew from 13 states to 50, bringing those lands together to make the world's fourth largest nation. Within those borders are the residents of the world's third most populous nation. The population of the 13 colonies was a little over 3 million. It has since multiplied by over 100, today reaching an estimated population of about 328 million. Furthermore, how well those people live, in terms of their health, would also doubtlessly amaze them. Living to a ripe old age was far from guaranteed to most people throughout history. About half of all children born in Rome and the medieval world, for example, perished within their first few years, many from disorders we today can treat. If you did survive, then you entered a brutal and harsh world where death from accidents, disease, famine, warfare, childbirth, and more were commonplace. Early America, with an estimated child mortality rate of about 40%, was not much different, but it was getting a little bit better. Recall, of course, that America was founded on the cusp of the Industrial Revolution. There were already notable improvements to things like agriculture and medicine being made in the lifetimes of these gentlemen, such as the popularization of four-field crop rotation and the English scientist Edward Jenner's work on vaccines. These kinds of improvements would soon not only allow many more people to live on this planet, but allow them to live longer and healthier as well. Life expectancy was about 35 in late 18th century America, but keep in mind, most people did not actually die at 35. That number is an average dragged down by this common infant mortality. Today, American life expectancy is about 79 years, 76 years for men, 81 years for women. As we can tell by these statistics, having a family involved a lot of pain, risk, and sacrifice. It's interesting then that having a family, and aiming for a large one, was the normal behavior and a primary desire of the age, much more so than in our age even. Marriage and childbearing was good for society, God's will, and therefore it was simply what one did. Today, a voluntary decline in fertility and a rise in childlessness altogether is so common